Hi, my name is Guang, 12 years old. For this lesson, we'll be continuing on with techniques and applications for definite integration. For this lesson, definite integration, we'll have for this double integration. R is bigger or equals to 0 and smaller or equals to negative 2a sine theta, while over here we have theta, which is bigger or equals to negative pi over 2 and smaller or equals to 0. Well, for this part, let me just write it down for one sec. Okay, so you may be wondering, we cannot continue on like this. Well, yes, we cannot continue on like this, so we'll have to let R be equals to. So we are going to do a trigonometric substitution whereas R is equals to and this is what we get for phi, which we'll need for the boundary later. So for this part, what we have over here will be, so we can differentiate on both sides for this part in order to find what dr is. And now we can find the boundary for phi. So the boundary for phi, if you substitute 0 inside, inverse sine 0 will still be 0. Well, for this part, if you substitute the sine, the 2a sine phi, so for this part, if you substitute over here the negative 2a sine theta, the 2a will simplify this. So over here, the sine and the inverse sine can technically cancel each other out. So what you're going to get is a negative theta. So when you get a negative theta, so for the theta it doesn't change, but for the r you will change it to phi. So when you substitute this inside, what you're going to get for the denominator will be 4a squared minus 4a squared sine square phi. And then for the numerator, what you have is the r squared, so 4a squared sine square phi. Well, for the dr, you'll get the times 2a cosine phi d phi. Okay, and then we will also have a d theta at the back. So for this part over here, you can take out the 4a squared out of the square root and you'll get a 2a. So you're going to get So over here what you're going to have is 1 minus sine square phi. And the 2a you can simplify. So what is 1 minus sine square phi? So sine square phi plus cosine square phi is basically equals to 1. So 1 minus sine square phi is basically cosine square phi. Well, the cosine square phi, since it's a square root, so you're just going to end up with a cosine phi. And here you also have a cosine phi, which we can simplify. So for this part, once we simplify for the cosine phi, so what we're going to get is well, for this part, you can use the double angle formula over here, which I will use up one of the tools which I will get. So for this part, you're going to have 1 minus cosine 2 phi d phi d theta. And once you get this, you can basically integrate for both of these for the phi part. And then for this part, the cosine will become sine, but with a half, because then you need a half to integrate for this 2 cosine 2 phi, the 2 phi part. Well, for this part, now you can substitute these two in for the boundaries in. Well, if you substitute negative theta over here, you're just going to end up with this. Like this, okay? Well, over here on the other hand, and for this part, when you put the 0 inside, you'll still get a 0. Well, if you put the negative inside this negative, the sign negative something is basically negative sign something. So the negative will become positive, and you'll end up with like this, okay? So this will be what you get, and now for this part, you can once again integrate for both parts. Well, over here, if you integrate for this part, you're going to get half theta squared from negative pi over 4 to 0, as shown here. And then we're going to plus this part, which will need another half. Well, the sine will become a cosine instead. and sine integration becomes negative cosine. Then you end up like this with this part, and then for this you can also substitute. So over here what you're going to get for this part is, so when you substitute 0 in, you're just going to get 0, while if you substitute this part in, negative, for this part will become positive. For a reminder, this has a square, so even though this is negative, it will still be positive. While the 2 and the 2 can simplify, and you'll simply get a squared times pi squared over 4 squared, which is 16, and then your minus. So when you sub 0 in over here, so if you sub 0 in, you get a 1, while if you sub this pi in, you get so negative pi over 2. So apparently cosine and pi over 2 is 0. So you're going to get a squared over 2, which is basically like this. Okay, so this will be the result they will get. So for this lesson, what we mainly used was basically just as a trigonometric substitution. Then after that, we used the double angle formula to get the 1 minus cosine 2 phi, then some basic integration. Well, that'll be all for this lesson. Last but not least, thank you for your watching.